Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show. I'm Tasha Simms.
And I'm Mark Karan.
Mark Karan with spotty internet, so he's going to be kind of in and out, but not distorted, right? You're never distorted.
That's right. Well, maybe I'm always distorted.
Or maybe you're always distorted. Yeah, and we're all static. You're listening to Conscious Living Radio, 100.5 FM in Vancouver, Wednesday night, 6 to 7 p.m. If you're seeing this right now on Facebook Live, obviously it's not Wednesday, although it is a confusing time for many people and it might feel like a Wednesday. Anyway, welcome to the show. We're talking about one of my favorite topics, love, today. Matthew McKay is a Ph.D. clinical psychologist. He's based out of Berkeley, California, professor of psychology at Wright Institute, founder of the Berkeley CBT Clinic, and co-founder of the Bay Area Trauma Recovery Center for Low-Income Clients. He's authored and co-authored more than 40 books, including the Relaxation and Stress Reduction Workbook, Seeking Jordan, and the Luminous Landscape of the Afterlife. So today we're talking about his latest book, Love in the Time of Impermanence. Welcome back to the show, Matthew.
I'm glad to be with you, Tasha.
Well, I so enjoyed our last interview where we focused on the luminous landscape of the afterlife. And this book, Love in the Time of Impermanence, it's awesome. It's so experiential and I highly recommend it. I'm curious, what moved you to hone in on love?
Well, there are several important things for me. One is I've been a couples therapist for 40-something years. And I've seen over that time a lot of people lose love. And I've seen how that happens. And I've also learned some things about how people can regain or reinvigorate the love between them. So those are some of the things I wanted to share. Also, another part of my experience is losing my son 14 years ago. And it became very important to me to learn how to hold on to love and keep love for those we lose and who are on the other side. How do you do that? And so both of these experiences have influenced me a lot because on this plane, on the physical world, love is very hard. It's hard to hold on to in the face of all the impermanence we have, in the face of rejection, change, death, and all the other forms of change and impermanence that surround us. But most particularly in the face of pain. We have a lot of pain in our lives. Mm-hmm. And really pain gets in the way of love. It becomes an enormous challenge to hold on to love when we're in pain. And that was the main thing I saw happening to the couples I work with. They were in pain and they were focused on the pain and coping with the pain and trying to get rid of the pain instead of focusing on how do I hold on to love.
And I guess it would lead to a complete redefining of what love is, because for love to flourish inside ourselves, especially when we're going through a struggle or pain or loss or tragedy, that would feel like the ultimate demonstration of our basic nature. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Because if you're a victim of something, there's no way. I love the idea of acting as love would, or listening through the ears of love. Like for me, it's got to be kinesthetic. What would love do? And I think you may say that as well in your book, but that's been my North Star for years. I've held on to it in times of reactivity, going, what would love do? Well, they sure aren't going to say what you're about to say, Tasha. So, deep breath, get centered. Yeah. And that's when I would think, as a therapist, it's like the greatest opportunity in front of you with these couples to redefine love and move into another relationship. Another phase of the relationship is in front of you. What is the key ingredient to support people to kind of wake up to that possibility that love isn't what we've been conditioned to believe it is?
Well, I mean, the problem is that we fall in love, and we think that experience, that limerence of just really just being so attracted to the other person, needing that person, feeling so connected, so much pleasure and happiness being in their company. We think that the feeling of love is love. And as some of those things fade or change because they're impermanent, we actually have this sense that we're losing love. And what you're saying is really important, because love is not a feeling. It's not that limerence. It's not a need. It's not sexual attraction. So we think those things are love, but what love really is what you said. It's action. It's love is all about doing, all about our behavior. And when you think about it, feelings come and go. You know, even when you're so intensely and feel love and engagement for another person, that feeling, you know, shows up and then it fades. It shows up and it fades, and it, you know, it's there and not there, and that feeling is very impermanent. And yet the love can endure, because it's not that feeling. It's what we do. It's how we act and the choices we make in relationship to that person we love.
And I think you defined it in your book as the connection between the people, not the actual feeling of pleasure or enjoyment that you have this connection, but the connection. I wonder if you could say more about that.
Yeah, love is contained in the relationship, but a relationship, again, is not a feeling. A relationship is what we do. When you think about it, you know, let's say you have a dear friend. That relationship is when you call them up and say, "How are you doing?" It's when you go out to lunch and share your experiences with each other. It's when you help them when they're struggling and in need. Listening to what's going on for them, trying to understand them. All of this is our acts of love, and the love is the relationship, and the relationship is all of those behaviors that you have toward each other, all those ways you enact love with each other. So that's, I think, and the point you're making is something that really is core for me. Love is what we do. Right. Not what we feel.
Right. And we're going to get to in a bit what we can do to demonstrate that beauty of love. But I just want to, something just occurs to me, and I wonder what you think about it. ACIM, so A Course in Miracles, and I don't know if you're familiar, says love has no opposite, that there is either love or a cry for love. Does that fit with your understanding?
No.
Okay.
It doesn't actually fit for me. There is an opposite of love. It isn't hate. The opposite of love is rejection, ostracism, pushing away. The opposite of love is the opposite of relationship. The opposite of love is dehumanizing. In some ways, the opposite of love is tribalism. Like there's us, the good folks, and then there's these other folks, the bad folks.
Right.
So the opposite of love is disconnection in any form.
And isn't disconnection a cry for love?
It could be, and we could agree that perhaps it is, that the act of disconnection or the experience of disconnection creates a tremendous need for love, and we could say that. But that's not always what people actually experience when they're disconnecting. They're actively disconnecting. You know, I mean, you know, President Putin is engaged in a massive disconnection, separating people and dehumanizing them. That, in my view, is the opposite of love. He may, on some level, need love, but he is not. All of his behavior is the opposite of love.
Yes. And I think for me, the words cry for love are helpful in the sense is they I can dislike the action and stand against it, but still see that somewhere in that human being was a child or whatever, whatever. I'm not going to, I don't need to do psychoanalyze Putin, but it brings a little more compassion to my ability to act as love would when I perceive behavior that's so abhorrent and out of line. It's the one thing, those words cry for love, that on some level there's something lacking or missing for that person, that they're behaving so badly. It moves me to a state of, I can't say I have compassion for him, but do you know what I'm saying? At least some degree of not being in that polarized us against them kind of thinking.
I think one of the things I'm hearing you say is that when we, in the face of de-relationship, disconnection, it makes us want to love and speak love when we witness that.
Right. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You also said in the book that the mere thought that there is good and evil creates evil. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that piece? Can you say more about that? Because that's a pretty intense, you look at the world today and people are seeing it everywhere, good and evil, us and them, this and that. Tell us what you mean by that the mere thought that there is good and evil creates evil.
Well, it goes back to what we were just talking about a moment ago: disconnection, de-relationship, dehumanizing. These processes, when we decide, there's good and evil, as soon as we make those dichotomies and label someone as not good, as evil, as someone, some on some level less than human, because they're really bad and wrong. That perception is the genesis of evil, because what evil is disconnection. Mm-hmm. It's non-love. It's ostracism. It's separating us from them. And so by thinking in terms of good and evil, we actually create it. Mm-hmm. We create dehumanized conditions. We create pain and disconnection and the pushing away. Right. Rejection is saying, I don't like you because you're bad. As soon as we do that, it slides toward evil. It mm-hmm. slides toward disconnection and disallowing that person's humanity.
As if it's a necessary component for that kind of, you need a bad guy, right? If you're in that scenario. And that's certainly what's going on in the world. I wonder if you could comment on what is helpful in the face of this kind of diversity that we're seeing, both personally or globally. What can one do when we are surrounded by it?
One of the first things that we can do is start practicing non-judgment. To begin, when you're walking around in the world, you're looking at things, you're looking at people, you're looking at situations, you're observing. And very often as we're watching, there's a judgment attached to it. You see somebody driving by in a Porsche, dressed in nice clothes, and one person seeing that might say to themselves, "Well, there's a rich, son of a gun." There's a judgment, and so often we have judgments attached to our perceptions. Instead of just having the experience, we sort of protect ourselves from the experience by deciding whether it's good or bad. And that habit of judgment is one of the things that we have to start confronting, because the judgments calcify, they harden, and they start to create a world, a dichotomous world in which there's good and bad. There's me and mine and what matters to me, and then there's all this other stuff out there that's bad, that's wrong, that there's something terrible about it, and I can reject it and push it away. That kind of thinking is what we have to start noticing, and to be able to walk through the world and actually practice non-judgment. to notice what you see and notice if a judgment thought shows up, and see if you can just let that experience in and let the judgment go. Let me just have this experience and be present for this experience. And even if this judgment thought is there, I can let it go and just come back and have this experience.
Right. And we've got to include ourselves, because I know people who are on a path of, spiritual evolution, and they will catch their judgments, but then they judge themselves for having judged, which is exactly the perpetuation of this whole system.
We start to hate ourselves because we have all of these judgments. But in a way, again, going back to my work as a couples therapist, that's almost always the genesis for the destruction of love is when one or both are starting to entertain strong judgments about each other.
Mm-hmm.
And those judgments are toxic to love. And it's important then to start learning how to experience each other, even if there's pain, even if something doesn't feel good. That's okay. It's okay to acknowledge that doesn't feel good. You just said blah 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 to me, that didn't feel good. But that's not a judgment. That's just a description of your experience. Mm-hmm. So to go back to the experience itself without the judgment, and see if we can actually strip the judgment out of our experience, and start relating to each other without those kinds of labels and those dichotomous good bad ideas. You're being bad. You shouldn't have done that. As soon as we go down that road, we start to conceptualize the other person as bad. Mm-hmm. And as soon as that starts, love is really in serious danger.
It's interesting, as you speak, I'm thinking about perception and how deadly not knowing that we have choice around that. And so what you're describing is an ability, growing your ability to notice the filter that you're perceiving, and not need to be right about it, just notice it. Is that right? And maybe express it or share it, but not need to present a case or get you to be different in order for me not to have that perception, that it's more of an inside job. Am I understanding?
That's right. And also to focus our attention on our experience as opposed to these thoughts, these evaluative thoughts, to be able to say to one's partner, when you got home late, I was kind of hurt and disappointed, as opposed to, what's the matter with you? You're late again. Yeah. You're wrecking our relationship. Blah blah. So again, to separate experience from judgment, and when the judgment starts to show up, to see if we can, if we can not act on that.
Well, and that judgment, for me, I would use the words, I make it mean. Like if there's a level of accountability in my judgment, my whole nervous system calms down, because it's true. I'm upset because I make it mean I'm not important to you in your example. But it's that meaning that needs correction. The feeling is what the feeling is, and it's activated, right? Yeah.
The feeling is okay. I mean, it may not feel good and it may not be pleasant, but it's what it is. I felt alone, or I felt lost, or I felt sad, or whatever that is. That's your experience. And if we can talk about our experience without, again, this level of evaluation, this good bad labeling that we do, both in our own minds and what we do verbally, and how we express it verbally. When we get angry, it always sends a message to the other person, you're bad. That anger inevitably sends that message. It creates those kind of dichotomies. And so one of the things that we have to learn how to do is to talk about our experience without sending the message, you're bad.
Right. And so back to globally. So that personally makes so much sense. I think I would love that in all my relationships, friendships, or, with my kid, in any relationships. And I think the only way to invite it is to be it, right? You literally, I don't know any other way, because I I can talk about this stuff too, and people just go, yeah, whatever. It's meaningless unless you're actually inviting it through an experience. Do you agree? I don't know any other way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the experience that I think we want to invite is one of the four components of love, which is knowing. We want, I want this person I love to know me, and I need to know them. I need to see them and understand them and get them, because you can't love an abstraction. You can't love a fantasy, a projection. You can only love something that you know. And so the part of one of the most important parts of the experience of love is actively knowing, seeking to know the other person, and actively sharing what's important for you. And going back to our example, so it may be, it could be quite important for my partner to know what happens inside of me when they're late, that they get to know me. But I also might want to know what was so important to them that they needed to be late. And so I need to know them, and I need to make sure that I share in such a way that they know me. And that, again, that's an active process. Those are choices we make with our words. And that's one of the most significant and important parts of love, is actively knowing.
I love those four elements of love. They're so simple. So we've started, let's go through all of them. So with knowledge, you say love is the thing that people say love is blind. This is your example that it's not. You actually have to know the person. I love that.
Love can't be blind.
It can't be blind.
Because if you're blind, you can't love. If you can't see the person, if you don't know the person, if you haven't taken the trouble to understand who they are, and knowing the person is, knowing another person is, it can be a lifetime undertaking. Knowing what they fear, knowing what they seek and what they need, knowing significant moments in their history, knowing their aversions, preferences, knowing about their emotional. I mean, there is so much that we need to know about this other human in order for our love to be really strong and complete. And they need to know some of these things about us as well. And so this knowledge is like, foundational to building love.
And yet there are people who don't want to be known. Like they might in their deepest essence, but they actually seem to resist going deeper. I mean, knowledge, knowing someone is deep. It's not surface. What is that resistance about? Do you know what I'm talking about? Where they literally are, it's like plexiglass that you're bouncing off, and they don't want to go deeper.
Usually the fear of going deeper is based on a schema of unworthiness. I see myself as unworthy, and I'm afraid if you get to know me, you're going to see me as unworthy and reject me. In psychology, we call it a defectiveness schema. It's like my basic sense of me is there's something wrong with me, and I don't want you to see it. And so I have to be careful, and I can't show you too much. And that is hard, because it does get in the way of love, because we're hiding ourselves and not letting the other person see, in particular, our vulnerability and our fear. In some ways, that's the most important thing to share, is my fear that you will see something wrong in me, and this sort of this desire to kind of hold tight and protect myself. That may be vital for my partner to actually be able to fully love me, because that's an important part of me, and to really love me, they would have to see it and know it. And I won't feel loved if I'm hiding it.
Exactly.
How could they love me? Because they don't even see this part of me.
Right. And the healing itself comes from showing it and being loved. I mean, that is how love heals. Yes, it does have to be open.
Love heals by being seen.
Yeah, that's good.
So true. And we all carry these parts of us that we feel are wrong, or that we feel shame about. And it's so profoundly healing to be able to share that with someone and have them accept it without judgment. Yes,
Yeah.
I see that. I see that pain. I see that part of you, and I care for you.
Yeah.
Uh,
Which moves us to compassion.
Yeah.
Which is another element of love, you said. Tell us why that's such an important part of love and caring.
Compassion is important. Well, first of all, compassion for self is important for self-love, because it changes your relationship to pain. Compassion is about acknowledging pain. It's about acknowledging that the beloved suffers and struggles, and hurts. And compassion is two things. One is seeing it and appreciating the truth of that there's pain, that we all go through life, and we're afflicted by things that hurt us, and afflicted by losses and the impermanence that surrounds us. So we're all struggling with pain, and so compassion is about recognizing that, seeing the pain, and also having a desire to somehow mitigate, help, or support the other person's well-being. And self-compassion is really important for self-love, because first of all, we have to be able to see and acknowledge our own pain. A lot of us are hiding from the pain that we live with, and we don't want to see it. And because we don't want to see it, we can't have any compassion for ourselves. And so seeing our own pain is a doorway to self-compassion, acknowledging that we struggle and we suffer, and seeing the pain of our beloved, of the people around us who struggle and suffer, and being able to see their pain and wish for them wellness. That's an incredibly important doorway to love, because that compassion turns that, again, love into action. It's seeing and knowing, and it's doing something, even if it's just providing some emotional support or caring. It's doing something to respond to that other person's pain. So yeah, compassion, and you can see how they work together with knowing.
And care, which is your third element, right? Which you said something interesting about that. You said it was the opposite of wanting. So we say we want love, we want someone in our life, but this idea of want somehow gets in the way of a full experience of love. Is that how you meant it?
Well, wanting love is perfectly reasonable. We all, I think, want love, and even we might even say crave love. But it's wanting love is sort of a kind of a passive experience. It's like it's just desire. It's just desire.
Yeah.
But care which is a profoundly important component of love, is not desire. It's wanting something for someone else, wanting to take care of this other person, not just their pain, but wanting to support them in the fullness of wellness, wanting to support their learning, their growth, their evolution as a human, wanting to give them an experience of being valued. And all of that is part of caring. And again, it's a very active process. It's not just something that I feel like I care about so-and-so. Well, that's, I can sit here and say I care about various people in my life, but what am I doing to enact that care? And, going back to the work with couples, people forget that love requires daily acts of care. And what does care look like? It looks like, for one thing, it looks like I care enough about you to pay attention, right, to notice. I care enough about you to want to understand what your needs are, and to be interested and aware of those needs. I care enough about you to support you when you're struggling. So caring, again, a very active process that has to be enacted every day to keep love alive.
Yeah, I heard once, I love this sentence, love is a verb. And I went, yes, that's really what you're talking about here. Your other element, intention. How does intention factor into our ability to love?
Well, intention is kind of it's the gas that makes the car go. It's like it's where all of these where care, knowledge, and compassion become action through intention, through my intention to bring that into my daily life, and what we call moments of choice. And so one of the things that I think is really important for people to do, if they can, is to sow what we call morning intention onto, say, a simple meditation process. So let's say you get up in the morning, you begin your day, and you do we suggest do very simple Vipassana meditation of focusing on the breath, noticing the in and out of the breath. When you have a thought, saying, oh, there's a thought, going back to the breath. And so there's a kind of a quieting that goes on. And you probably don't have to do that for more than 3 or 4 minutes. And at the end of that quieting process, then we want to engage in the morning intention. And the morning intention goes like this: today, at the moment of choice, I am love. And so this intention is I scan forward through my day. I can I imagine various people that I'll see and have interactions with, and all through these interactions, there are going to be moments of choice, and the choice will be, do something impulsive, act on desire, emotional pain, physical pain, act on to get rid of something, to try to avoid something, or to act on love. And so a moment of choice, they'll exist all throughout the day. So today, at the moment of choice, I am love, scanning ahead and developing a full intention to bring love to every one of those moments where I could, act on my emotions, act on my pain, act on just kind of willful desire. No, I'm going to see those moments as they emerge, and I'm going to hold that intention all throughout the day. So intention is really how the rubber meets the road in terms of bringing love into action.
I love that. And yeah, I'd use the words North Star. Intention for me is like sailing a ship, and that's where I'm headed, but I'll go off course. So I just got to learn to keep tacking back, but it's so clear what I'm tacking back to that state, which is what you're talking about intending. So you've mentioned all 3 danger zones there, but I want to flag it for the listeners. What are the 3 danger zones that hijack love? You said
there are 3 things that we have to watch out for, and those are typically the moments of choice. One is when we have a strong emotion. It could be any strong emotion. It could be, but emotions always have action urges associated with them. So for example, when we're sad, the action urge is to withdraw. When we're ashamed, the action urge is to withdraw. When we're afraid, it's to avoid. The action urge is avoid. When we're angry, the action urge is to attack. So all significant emotions have an action urge, and these action urges, while they have a survival value, usually take us further from love. And so we have a choice. Do I just act on this emotion? Do I let this emotion tell me what I'm going to do and dictate my behavior via the action urge, or I'm going to act on love? So strong emotion is one area where we have a moment of choice. Another area is when we have strong desire, and so desire often sort of overtakes us, and we really want something. And we're trying to get it, and so that ends up shaping our behavior. And so actually noticing that there may be a choice here. This thing that I desire versus acting on love. Let me see if there's a choice, and notice that. And the third area in terms of moment of choice is pain. It could be physical pain, psychological pain, even spiritual pain. But when we're in pain, we tend to get into avoidance mode. We can try to do something about that pain. So our focus is on, I got to get out of pain. You know, I mean, for example, let's say your partner says something that kind of hurts your feelings, feels kind of critical and hurts your feelings. So now you're feeling maybe some shame, which makes you want to kind of withdraw, or you maybe also feeling some anger, which makes you want to attack. But neither of those responses is going to bring you closer to love. In fact, both of those responses are pretty toxic for love. Mm-hmm. And so noticing that this is a moment of choice. I'm hurting here, and I'm having some emotions that are kind of pushing me around. But this is a moment of choice. How would I act on love at this moment, even though I'm in pain? And that's a huge challenge. And I think it's really what we're here on this earth trying to learn, frankly, mm-hmm. is how to love in the face of pain. Right. When things hurt, how do you love? You know, as you're a parent, you've just had a really crappy day at work, and you're exhausted, and you feel maybe hurt or worried about circumstances. There's a physical component to it, and your child has had a hard day at school and needs your support and attention. And how do you love that child in the face of that pain? Because you're not feeling very good. And the tendency is to just, kind of pull away and do something to take care of yourself. And that child that you love, has to fend for themselves. And that's just a simple example, but it's like all through the day, we're having those experiences where we're in pain, where we have strong emotions, where we have strong desire. They're all going to be moments of choice. And the pain, the emotion, and the desire tries to often pull us in a direction of an action urge that is contrary to love. So how do we hold on to love? How do we act on love when those urges are hammering at us?
Mm-hmm. And I think in the book you talked about even things that we feel an aversion towards, like it could be a huge reaction. So how do we, what's one step, what's one kind of tip you might have in the face of pain or aversion that a person could do to move toward love?
Well, there's a number of important things. First of all, with aversion, noticing that there's a judgment usually that goes with the aversion. And see if we can put the judgment a little bit to the side and just get back to what is our experience. At the root of every aversion is something is hurting. Mm-hmm. This thing that we have an aversion to, or this person we have an aversion to, has caused us some sort of pain. And to just allow that experience, to notice, well, what is this pain that I'm having? What is this thing that goes on inside me when I'm in the presence of this thing or person that I have an aversion to, and kind of moving past the judgment to just allowing the experience. What is this that I'm going through? And then also allowing that. I'll hold this thing that doesn't feel good, and let me also then right next to that look at this thing or person that I have an aversion to. Let me look at their pain. What's going on for them? Let me look at and know their experience as best I can. And I'm going to hold my pain over here. I'm not going to try to deny it or push it away. But what I am going to do is suspend and let go of my judgment. And I'm going to notice my pain, but I'm also going to notice the experience of this other. And I'm going to hold that too. Let me notice whatever their needs or their fears or their struggle might be. Let me at least be aware of that while I'm also noticing my own experience and my own reaction. So it requires a kind of a dialectic, of holding two things at once that don't go together.
Yeah. One
is my own pain, and the other is a willingness and awareness of this other. And to suspend judgment while I'm experiencing them.
And the beauty of that is, to me, that is turning the me into the we, because there's two of us, and we're separate, but we're not. but we both can be ourselves individually in this moment without, even if we don't agree, even if our pain is different or our perception is different, the container holds us both equally. And we are both deserving of understanding, caring, compassion, and intention. Yes. So I would think as a couple, that is, I've often said to my clients, your job is to know yourself and ask about the other, because you don't know someone else's reality. There has to be room for both realities at the same time. It's almost like a muscle that you learn to flex and grow. Do you see that being essential to how we perceive the world and helping the planet at this time? Like, is that globally, that ability to turn me into we, is that to you what's essential to help heal this planet, that piece?
I think it is, absolutely. And I guess the way I would we talked a little bit about this a few minutes ago of tribalism. Tribalism is destroying this planet. And it's destroying the community of the human community. And tribalism has lots of different forms it takes. You can see it in junior high school, where there's the in-group and the out-group the out-group gets rejected and ridiculed and so forth. And that tribalism exists at every level. And it is the root of our problem. And so we're, as we move toward oneness, a sense of all being in it together, of all belonging together in some way, even though we have lots of things that separate us and lots of differences. But the things that unite us are that we all have pain, we all struggle, we all suffer, we all have needs, we all need love, we all do love. And to be recognizing the things that hold us together as opposed to judgments and good bad dichotomous thinking that separates. And there's the in group and the out group. There's my tribe, and then there's all these other bad people that I don't want to have anything to do with. We see this in our politics today. We see tribalism is just rampant in our political thinking, and it's pulling us apart. Instead of understanding each other and actually being curious about each other and wanting to learn and understand how each of us is, sees and experiences the world, we're just rejecting that other person's experience. And kind of going back to couples for a minute, as couples start to lose love, one of the things that happens to them is that what they know of each other, what they know or learn about each other turns into a judgment. Oh, you need that? Well, what's that? Why do you need that? Or you're feeling why you shouldn't feel that? That's
right.
That's wrong. That's stupid. So whatever we discover about the other person turns into a judgment, as opposed to a process of it's kind of a humble process of not knowing, of like, boy, you're a mystery on some level. There are things, even perhaps after years, I don't really understand. Let me understand. And so what I do with my couples is probably what you do too, is I actually have them interview each other and ask questions. Well, what are you scared of in this situation? What do you really need from me in this situation? What's happened to you before that's affecting you right now and making this situation hard for you? But to do an inquiry in which each comes to the other with interest and kindness and a desire to know. And so those kinds of interviews are really important. And it's not just for couples. I mean, this is for people who don't. You're sitting on Amtrak and you're sitting at a table with some folks that look at the world very differently. They whole different political perspective. And so instead of going into judgment, it's like, let me understand you. Let me understand how you see and understand the world. There's something there that is important. So inquiry instead of judgment really is, I guess, what I would suggest.
And I want to understand you as opposed to I need you to understand me. because I've heard lots of conversations where people, I don't participate. I kind of go and they'll say, well, we're just trying to understand each other's point of view. And I'll say, sitting in the frequency of this doesn't feel good to me because I'm not hearing that. I'm hearing each of you wanting to be understood, but barely finishing a sentence before the other person jumps in with their point of view to be right about. Yeah. Whereas it needs that gap, it needs some space to go to reflect and receive in order to understand each other. If understanding is the goal, it can't be ping pong. It can't be that fast. It's not, that's not how it goes, right?
And going back for a second to this moment of choice that we were talking about, we get into these conversations with people and we get triggered. It could be a political conversation where somebody has a political viewpoint or advocates something that just doesn't fit at all for us. And immediately as we get triggered, we start to get angry. Then this is a moment of choice because anger makes me want to attack. Yeah. And so to be able to recognize that moment of choice and like, I see this coming. I can feel the anger. That's a moment of choice. I'm committed to act on love. What would love look like? And you were saying that earlier in the beginning. What would love look like in this situation? And love might look like asking interesting questions, or love might look like wanting to learn more about that person's pain that led them to have those political views or those ideas, more about their experience, their history. So love might look very different than what anger would drive me to do. And so and being aware that this is a moment where I can go toward love or toward rejection.
Yeah. You pose a question in your book that I think is really worth mentioning. You say, what can we truly count on if everything within and without is changing and dissolving? So I pose it to you. What can we really count on?
Well, oddly enough, we can count on love, which is a very strange thing because I'm saying we lose. There are all these toxic things that can kill love, and that unless we are actively engaging with love behaviors, we can lose it. But the one thing that, I guess, kind of from a spiritual point of view, since my view is that, we have an immortal soul, our consciousness continues after we leave our bodies. The love that we have between us is not lost on a spiritual level. It continues, even if you have a breakup with your partner and never speak to them again. That relationship continues to exist in the afterlife, and that love that you had continues to exist. So that's one thing. Love is actually eternal, even if we don't notice it, even if we're not acting on it. Once it's ignited between souls, it will continue. It may not be acknowledged or experienced on this planet, but it will continue. The second thing is that we can keep love by actively engaging with it. So love will last our whole lifetime, and then will last into the afterlife by doing those four things. By caring, by actually actively seeing and knowing, by having compassion, and by the intention to act on love. If we do those four things, we can keep love alive. It is permanent. It is something that we can hold on to. Because we have control over our behavior, So if we're acting on love in the face of pain, as much as we can, as much as possible, we will keep love alive, even in this impermanent place. And the love will last even past our lifetimes, into the afterlife. It'll never die there either.
And I just want to take one step in, because I find when you talk about the afterlife, I find it very sweet. And that's the word I would use. It's almost like I want to sigh and go, oh, like it's appealing. I want you to paint that picture for people, because everyone seems to be often so adverse and afraid of that experience of transition. But paint the picture of love in the afterlife, especially the sonic expression of love, and how that how you mention that in the book.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say again the afterlife isn't. The afterlife is not a place of judgment. There is no judgment in the afterlife. There's no hell. There's no good or bad. There literally is no judgment. So that's missing in the afterlife, even though some of our religious beliefs would suggest that we all have to face some sort of judgment. Secondly, the afterlife is really love. The connection between every spirit in the afterlife, every soul, and between every soul and the divine is love. That's all it is. And if you think about it this way, on Earth we communicate by making sounds that create molecules of air to vibrate, and that's how we can communicate to each other. In the afterlife, love is the medium through which all communication occurs. It's impossible not to love. It's impossible not to have the experience of being surrounded by love. And every being, every soul around you, you're connected by love. That is the connection. That is how you communicate. And so there is such great beauty there, not because, it's some place where people are playing harps, sitting in clouds, but it's a place where everything they do is acting on love. And that's what we're trying to learn how to do here, so that all of our behavior is acting in love in this face of pain. And of course, we come to this difficult place that's full of pain in order to learn how to love in the face of pain. So we don't have to deal with that in the afterlife.
Well, and I think you said in your earlier book too, that we can't actually transition into a state of love like you just described until we're in a frequency of it. And so part of practicing on earth really makes sense. You're not just doing this to be a good person. You're doing this because ultimately it's who you are and the state that you're going to go back to. So I love that too. And I know we got to wrap it up, right, Mark?
When you enter the afterlife and you don't have love at that moment, you're deaf. You're deaf in the afterlife. We call it DOA, deaf on arrival. So it's really important that we practice love so that we can hear it and experience it when we get there.
I love that. Well, I really appreciate your conversation today. Again, your book, all the usual places, Amazon, and Love in the Time or Impermanence. No, Love in the Time of Impermanence. I've got it. We've been speaking with Matthew McKay. Thanks for joining us, Matthew.
Thanks so much.
Conscious Living Radio, 100.5 FM in Vancouver. I'm Tasha Simms. And Mark, you're back for an exit.
I'm here. You can hear me.
Yes.
I figured out technology. My bad internet. I cheat with my telephone for my audio, so I don't miss a beat. It was a great conversation. Thank you so much, you guys. Matthew, always appreciate you and your work and your sharing. And your conversation was spot on. Gave me lots to think about as well. So thank you so much, as always.